Joining me now to talk more about the war in Ukraine is retired U.S. Army Major General William Enyart. Thank you for being with us this morning. I want to start with these latest attacks, these 76 missiles that were fired across Ukraine. Ukraine says that Moscow is using a Tu-95 strategic bomber for the first time. What is that and why is it significant?
Well, it's significant because of the capabilities that bomber can launch. It can not only launch a cruise missile that carries a standard warhead, it can also launch a nuclear-armed missile. And of course, Putin has threatened in the past nuclear weapons use in Ukraine. So the Ukrainians absolutely have to be very concerned about that. It's difficult enough defending against drones and missiles equipped with standard armament. But the possibility that there might be a nuclear-tipped weapon coming in has got to be absolutely of great concern to the Ukrainians, as indeed it should be to NATO and the U.S.
Does Ukraine have the means to combat a weapon like this?
Well, they certainly have had a great deal of success, claimed success in shooting down these missiles. I think the number that they're claiming to have shot down out of the 76 that were launched is 60. So they've got a very good success rate. If you're talking about a standard explosive device, you can survive 16 cruise missiles hitting your civilian infrastructure. But 16 nuclear-tipped or even half a dozen nuclear-tipped missiles equipped with nuclear devices would be completely devastating to the country. The Patriot missiles that are under consideration for transfer to the Ukrainians are highly accurate and could certainly take down even more of those missiles. The problem with the Patriot missile, it's very expensive. They run about $3 million a piece, and they're very technologically sophisticated. So it's going to take a lot of training to bring the Ukrainians up to speed to operate those devices. And I don't think there's any possibility at all that we'd put U.S. troops in there to man them.
Right. So Russia is warning of consequences if the U.S. sends in those Patriot missile defense systems. I mean, it seems like the wheels have already been put in motion there. You talk about the training. It could take months, right, to train Ukraine's forces on how to use them. If not the U.S., who's going to train them?
Well, there are certainly other nations that can train them. We have sold or provided these Patriot missiles to several of our allies. For example, Poland, immediately next door to Ukraine, does have Patriot missiles. The training currently for a Patriot missile battery would run a good 6 months. The Army says it can be compressed down to 90 days, and perhaps even less in a really desperate situation. But it will take some time to get those folks trained. They're not going to have to come to the States, though, to get that training. They can get that training in Poland or other NATO nations.
What is the risk, though, one, sending weaponry from the United States, but having U.S. forces helping in training with some of this weaponry? Help us understand the larger picture and the fine line that the U.S. does not want to cross.
Sure, Marni. I think the important thing to remember here is that the Patriot missiles, like most of the other weapons that we have provided Ukraine, are really defensive weapons. They're not offensive weapons. So a Patriot missile is designed either to strike from ground to air or air to air. It is not a ground-launched or air-launched missile that would be used to attack ground-based forces. So this is not a situation where those weapons could be used in an aggressive posture, but rather would be used in a defensive posture. So Russia's threats that they're going to attack these missiles, well, certainly they'll try to attack those missiles just like they try to attack tanks or artillery pieces or infantry forces in Ukraine. But we have to remember that Russia is the aggressor here, and these are defensive weapons against an aggressor. We certainly wouldn't want to put U.S. forces into Ukraine because that would be stepping up the posture of United States forces and would subject them, of course, to possible casualties in a war that we are not involved in. We are supporting the Ukrainians in their defensive efforts against the Russian aggression.
Yep, it's a delicate balance. Always appreciate talking to you, retired U.S. Army Major General William Enyart. Happy holidays.
My pleasure, Marni.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.